So, good morning, everybody. And I'm delighted to be in conversation this morning with Susana Cigano, who is the manager for customer support in Loom. Susana, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
And what I wanted to do, Susana, was to, like with COVID-19, like so many of like my clients, even the very large clients who have like thousands of people, have moved, 98% of their team to work remotely, which is a
Yeah.
whole different ball game. So I just wanted to kind of lean into your experience as a remote manager. So maybe just to kick off, you might just give us a little bit of your background and your history just working remotely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Maurice, for the invite. It's an absolute pleasure to do this. And it's given me a really great opportunity to think about what it does mean to work remotely. So to introduce myself, I'll start with my name. I'm Susana. I'm from Portugal. I started my career at Airbnb, where I ended up leading this customer experience team for payments in Europe and APAC. And then after that, I moved to some management roles in a couple of companies in the Netherlands. So for the past 3 years, actually, I have been managing the support team at Loom, which is a video company software based out of San Francisco. So my team is based all around the world, which is very exciting. Currently, my support team has 7 members, some in Portugal, some in England, and some in the United States. So again, very international team. And we're continuing to hire 2 more in the next month, and then a few more by the end of the year. So we're growing a lot this year, which is very exciting.
So, Susana, just in your experience, just what is the difference between leading a team, virtually, and then leading a team remotely?
That's a really great question. So I've been working remotely for the better part of the last 10 years. So I'm very, very used to the concept of working from outside of the office. Leading a team virtually means that I get to do my job from the comforts that my home provides, essentially, the job I love. I can get a lot of more quiet time. I can focus on tasks. I can feel a lot more productive. I really don't mind working from an office, obviously. I do love interacting with people in person. I do love, just being there with the team, but I can't deny the benefits of working remotely and leading a team remotely. I also do think that my team has benefited from me being remote and them being remote, so being managed remotely. I do end up having more time in my day to be available to them, to support them, and to just be there for them, because I'm not busy, running around the office, going from meeting to meeting. Just, sometimes you just spend a lot of time doing the coffee breaks and the impromptu meetings. You walk into someone, in the hall, and you just spend some time doing that. But yeah.
And for the people that you lead, what do you think, if you were asking them, what do you think the benefits are from their perspective of being led by a manager who's working remotely?
That's a great question. So I think the benefits are just kind of like being available. The availability is really, really great. I remember, in the Airbnb office, my manager was in the office, and there would be days that I wouldn't see him. So in that sense, maybe we could have just been working remotely and, the entire time. I do like that there's this direct line of communication that remote tools provide. So we have Slack, we have email. Obviously, in an office setting, those tools still exist. But when you're remote, I feel like teams just might feel that they can rely on those tools a little bit more to communicate, and it's expected of them to communicate via the tools. Versus if I'm in the office, maybe my team will expect to just talk to me when they see me, or talk to me when they have an in-person meeting with me, basically.
Okay, and to kind of to facilitate that communication, Susanna, what are the type of tools that so you're talking about Slack, so do you think that that's critical to the kind of the functioning of a remote team, like to have those tools readily available?
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the biggest benefits and one of the most important things when you're working remotely and leading teams remotely is managing the expectations and basically providing guidelines on how to communicate and when to communicate. So having a tool deck or a tool stack like, Slack, email, video like this, Zoom, Google Hangouts, Loom even, it's really, really helpful. And then defining when and how to communicate with your team using those tools, it's also very important.
Okay, so one of the things I teach on the leadership program that I deliver, Susanna, that you've been on,
Mhm. Yeah.
is all about trust, right? And it's all about,
Hmm.
establishing trust with your team. How
Yeah.
how do you do that when you're working remotely? What are some of the things that you've found useful?
Yeah. I think it's all about what you can see. If you don't see that something is happening, do you trust that it's being worked on? If so, that's great. You're probably leading a really successful remote team. If not, probably you're going to end up micromanaging your teammates and stressing yourself out in a way. I think that having a shared team mission is super important. If you start there, you can collaborate and strategize so that everyone is working towards the same goals. And then you can basically create an environment that feels a lot more team-like, even though you're basically working from home, isolated in your own space. Um, Personally, I like to encourage my team to meet regularly via video. Um, Even if I'm not on the call, like I think it really helps them build a sense of community. And again, it's all about communication, setting expectations, letting your team know that they're all working together and towards the same goal. Fostering that sense of community, of trust is really, really helpful. And then as a manager, managing the expectations from the team, same as in the office, I would still need to manage those expectations. I need to set those goals. And if you see that people need help, communicate early, communicate often, and just make sure that you're there for them and supporting them, which is, a manager's job
Yeah.
anyway.
And how do you,
Yeah.
excuse me, so how do you kind of motivate, or, how do you encourage, a remote team, so within
Yeah.
particularly tech, right, there's a lot of things like, bagel breakfasts, or, you can take your team out for coffee, all these things, but they're not available to you when you're, the small things, those kind of
Yeah.
intangible things that kind of glue a team together. So what alternatives have you come up with that seem to work for you?
So that's a great question, and something that, many blog posts have been written about. I myself wrote one a couple of years ago for Loom, and I've done a lot of research because working remotely for the past 3 years, I need to come up with ways to keep my team engaged, to foster that team spirit. So some of the activities that we've done at Loom that have helped us with this. So making sure that we're celebrating special moments together. Maybe you can even deliver some breakfast or some lunch to the team. There's services like Uber Eats or Deliveroo, something like that.
Right.
I did this recently with my team. We had a queue in the inbox of about 1,000 tickets, and we were 4 people, and we're like, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this queue and we're going to do it as a team, even though we're in 4 different countries. Let's do it. And by the end of the day, we had done it. It felt great. So to celebrate, I just sent a little treat to every person's house. It was a donut, maybe it was a cupcake, something like that. And they just took photos, they posted on Slack. It was a really nice moment. And we got to celebrate that as a team. And it felt like an accomplishment that we did together, even though we were in 4 different countries, which feels crazy.
Brilliant.
We That's awesome. We also hold some events like maybe trivia events. My team is really competitive, so they really love doing little competitions like that.
Okay.
We also recently did some personality tests, and then we shared the results in the meeting so that we know more about each other and how we communicate. But don't get me wrong, Maurice, we do get together in person if we can.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that I have a couple of team members here in Portugal, so I do like to see them and work with them, as much as I possibly can.
Sure.
Recently, that hasn't been
Well,
possible
yeah.
with a crisis, but I do think that it helps, bring the team together and know that there are people who are real out there working towards the same goal as you. It helps foster that feeling, and then you go and you continue working remotely and
Right.
just go from there.
So, Susanna, just talk about
Yeah.
like, you paint a beautiful picture of working remotely, you know.
Yeah.
I know that some people are finding it like a real challenge because they haven't
Yeah.
done it before. So what are some of the challenges that you've had over the years, in your 10
Yeah.
years of working remotely, and maybe some of the strategies that you have adopted
Mhm.
to overcome those challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, working remotely isn't for everyone, really. So, as a manager specifically, I can't afford to assume that my team knows exactly what's expected of them if I'm not properly communicating goals. So, working remotely is all about communication. This obviously happens as well in an office setting, but I do think it can be exacerbated a lot when everyone is working remotely. A challenge, for example, might be the lack of visibility into what my team is doing, and what their progress is. And honestly, it just doesn't, it's not just on my side, on the manager side, it can really be on their side too. They might struggle with some lack of face-to-face interaction. They might feel that, when you're working remotely, you don't get as much guidance as they would have in an office where they can just like tap a shoulder. Access to information might feel not as great too. So, unfortunately, when you are working remotely and someone needs to ask for help, it might feel like a bigger task than just tapping someone on the shoulder, as I was mentioning,
Yeah.
or maybe because you need to email them or call them, it's not really organic. And I think just kind of like the frustration that stems from that might be, a challenge there as well. Um, so to fix that, right, the strategies, the proven strategies that I've been using through the years, I'd say communicating early and often really helps driving alignment, helps creating visibility and keeping things on track. Some people might call it over communication. There's many blog posts about over communicating, but I think it's really important, especially right now when everyone is getting so used to working from home.
Yeah.
Communicating early, often, even if you feel like you're writing your every thought into Slack or an email, just do it. It's better to be safe than sorry,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to work communications. Um, so yeah, I mean, and then in terms of like talking about access to information sometimes being a challenge, over communicating helps that. But because people can't physically see each other, sometimes also letting people know that they're unavailable is useful to manage expectations. Um, an issue is that whenever you feel ignored, that creates frustration.
Yeah.
So, for example, to give you a very specific example, when my team needs focus time and they're not available on Slack because they're taking a customer meeting or they're working on a project specifically, I ask them to update their Slack or to block their calendar so that I know that they're busy. So this means that if I ping them during that time, I know that I'm not going to get a response from them at
Yeah.
all, which is totally fine. So then I can manage my expectation and remove any frustration that could potentially be created because I'm not hearing back. Maybe they're not at their computer, maybe they're not working. No, they're just busy doing their jobs, and I just need to wait a little bit, just like I would have waited if I was in an office and I saw them in a meeting. Um,
That's a great tip. That's a great tip. Like that
oh,
really.
I'm glad you.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. And obviously then the rest of the team can see that as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's really worked well for us at Loom because most of our core values are centered around transparency. So we want to make sure that everyone knows at any given time what everyone is up to. And I think that's a big core value when you're working remotely, is just making sure that you're transparent and you're over communicating. We do use dedicated Slack channels to record and document updates. We like to jump on video calls, record videos, and basically communicate in a very visual way. And I think that's a very big part of communicating in a transparent way. Um, I would even go a little bit further and say that, and this is going to sound like a shout out to Loom, where I work at, which is a video company. But obviously, because it's so ingrained in our culture, we try to do as much as possible, and use our product. So we do find that working and communicating through video is super helpful to us, because when it comes to retaining information, it's just so important to see it visually, and it really does help people understand a little bit more, and a lot easier what the information is about. So let's say, for example, that, I have a team member, they're working in Seattle and I'm in Portugal. When it's, the middle of the day in Seattle, it might be the middle of the night for me in Portugal. So if they have a video of me walking through that workflow, explaining that concept, that's saved, they can just go to the video and watch the video. They don't have to wait for me to wake up, reply to that ping, reply to that email. And it really allows us to basically share information without us being in the same room or in the same physical space for that information to be shared, which is super helpful.
I totally agree with you, because I even
Yeah.
personally, at this
Yeah.
time, so I'm living in the home at the moment on my own, and so it's
Mhm.
quite isolating. So I find personally that I'm not ringing friends or family. I'm actually doing
Mhm.
video calls, and you kind of feel that you kind of got a better connection. I had a problem
Mhm.
with my printer actually last week, and my remote IT guy just sent me a video of how to fix it. Fantastic. I
Yeah,
like what you said. I could follow the
exactly.
workflow, no problem at all. Um,
Exactly.
so Susanna, this has been really, really helpful, and thank you for allowing me to lean into your experience of working remotely today. And the
Of
key
course.
takeaways that I'm taking from our conversation is really communication, 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 and
Yes.
over communicate.
Yes.
Making sure that you have the right tools like Slack, like available to kind of build that kind of community feel. Make
Mhm.
sure that you celebrate success, and using technology cleverly, like video calls and things like that.
100%. Yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you so much for
of course.
for allowing me to lean into your experience this morning, and stay safe and well.
You too, Maurice. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Bye bye.